What are you going to do tomorrow? Are you going to sleep in?
Yeah, I am. I don't have to preach.
You don't have Sunday school or anything. There's nothing going on.
I've got nothing. I can just be a normal church person.
He has wiped out by his grace through faith in Christ your every sin, past, present, future.
Christian hedonist is somebody who says that my greatest joy, my greatest good is God. And therefore, I will pursue that joy and I will pursue that God above all else. So God's glorified and I'm satisfied.
You are now listening to the Pastor Discussions Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 8 of the Pastor Discussions Podcast. Or actually, it's episode 9. Dang it.
You wrote it down.
I did write it down.
In our last show, too.
I did.
It's written up there as number 7, so we have 2 episodes.
We do. No, I changed it.
Oh, you did?
I did. I realized that. I went back. Oh, talk about that in a minute. All right. Well, this is episode 9 of the Pastor Discussions Podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Joe. And this is your everyday conversation.
Every
week conversation.
We don't do this every day, Joe. If we did this every day, we would not do anything else.
Well, this is how you should talk every day about it.
This is, yeah.
Your weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.
Doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.
That was the longest intro
we
have ever had.
There you go, Corey. That one's for you. So if you are following the podcast or subscribed, you probably saw 2 episode 7s because here's a fun fact about me. Organization and detail are not my strong suit. So I went and uploaded it and I didn't even look at what the last one was. So
you couldn't even remember which, I'm pretty sure we said it was episode 8 in the beginning, didn't we?
We said, yeah, I think so too. This is a bad week, man. So I went in and changed that. This is episode 9 though.
Yep.
So you're on the right episode now. Yeah, I know, right? Close. That was a close one. So what's up, Joe? How was your week?
It was good.
No, it wasn't. We were just talking about it before we started. This was just kind of a crummy week.
Yeah, it was a tough one, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Those come with the good.
Yep. That's true. So, it's Saturday now and, tomorrow we gather for worship. So that makes everything better.
It can.
Yeah. Well, it makes it, I get to sleep in tomorrow.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Really like the first time in ages for you.
I know this, so I'm not preaching tomorrow because we're doing missions month here at Arbor Drive and we have a missionary that we support coming in and he's going to preach and we don't have Sunday school because we have the missions breakfast instead. So I literally have nothing to do tomorrow. I'm not involved in the service at all. I get to be a normal church attender.
Therefore, you don't have sermon prep to do at 12 o'clock on Saturday night.
That's true. I don't have sermon prep to do at 12 o'clock at Saturday night.
Just the final prep, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's all I do.
Yeah.
That's all pastors ever do. Is I just work one day a week.
Yeah. Whether that's Wednesday or Sunday, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, and it's true. It fluctuates. You know, sometimes I come in on Wednesday, sometimes it's just on Sunday.
I saw you guys were watching baseball today.
Yeah, baseball's back. I'm so excited about that. We're done with football, done with basketball. Baseball is back, baby.
Whatever, basketball is just getting started.
Yeah, basketball is like a 12-month sport. They never stop.
Basketball is shorter than baseball.
But they've got 2 seasons, right?
No.
I thought they did.
1 season.
Okay.
Well, it might as well be. It might as well be the first 3 quarters, which nobody cares about, and then the last quarter.
Yeah, there you go.
Playoffs.
March Madness. I like March Madness.
Yeah, that's coming up too.
That's fun. That's always, we ought to get a thing going in the office.
Bracket?
Yeah. Try to get a bracket going. I know nothing about any of the teams.
I don't think anybody in the office besides me knows anything about any of the teams.
Yeah, it's probably true.
Jonathan would pick Kentucky all the way.
He would pick Kentucky. I'd pick K-State. That's pretty much typically how it goes.
Well, they have to get in for you.
Yeah,
to pick them.
that's true. And Villanova, I know Villanova because they blew my bracket the last 8 times. So I was like, I'm going to pick Villanova now. And then they won't do well.
They won't do well for you this time. So
yeah. So yeah, I get to just sleep in tomorrow and spend time with the family.
You guys eating breakfast together?
Yeah, we'll probably eat breakfast together, which is unusual. And then come into church, and then I'm just going to be super critical of everything.
So Carly's eating this weird food. Does she have weird food for breakfast too?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's not okay. So backstory. Carly's doing this 80-day challenge thing where it's like this clean eating diet thing. I don't know.
She's just torturing herself.
She is, but I think she's liking the results. So, yeah. So she's
There's
doing
more
that.
fun way to get results.
No, but she's working out like 6 days a week and busting her rear doing that, and then doing this clean eating thing. So I tried it with her. I was like, yeah, I'll do it with you. And it lasted like 2 meals, I think, 2 or 3 meals. I was like, oh, but her like breakfasts are like yogurt and peanut butter and
Like just eating peanut butter.
well, she puts peanut butter on the yogurt. I don't know. This is why I'm not doing it.
Gross.
I don't do yogurt either.
Yeah, I'm
So-
not a yogurt person.
That's gross.
It's like bad milk.
It is. But you know what's weird? I don't do yogurt, but I can do cottage cheese.
I love cottage cheese.
See,
Cottage
isn't
cheese
that
is good.
strange? Cottage cheese
No,
is just
'cause-
bad milk too.
Yeah, but it's got like a
It's
little,
like worse milk, I think.
Maybe. I don't know what it is. Yogurt just has a sour taste to it.
It's the texture thing for me.
See, the texture doesn't bother me.
It's like eating slime. Remember like in the 90s, there was a slime show?
No.
Oh, Nickelodeon.
I wasn't allowed to. We didn't have any cable, and I wasn't really allowed to watch any TV.
Well, there was a slime show where the kids would get slimed or slime their parents or something like that. Anyway.
Okay, I've heard about it.
Yeah, and so like every time I pick up a spoonful of yogurt, it just ugh.
reminds you.
It
Of
reminds
slime.
me of slime, like white slime. I just can't do it. It's weird. So anyway,
So what are we talking about today?
well, this might be the most controversial Pastor Discussions podcast episode yet.
Hey, maybe we'll get people to actually comment and respond.
Yeah, I know. What we're going to do is we're just going to say every inflammatory thing we can possibly say, and then we're going to mock you for disagreeing with us.
About every touchy subject.
About
that's
every
out
touchy
there.
subject. And then what we're going to do is when you say something that might have some sort of validity, we're going to make fun of you. And then we're going to attack you personally. And that's it. And I'm going to shut off the comments then. I'm going to get the last say and then shut off the comments on social media.
Okay, if you've not been listening, you know we're not being serious right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So
We're not
just-
being serious.
just-
But that was hyperbole. That was exaggeration to make a point. No, okay. So this was my idea. So you ran the show last week and came up with the idea last week. And this week I was thinking about this, and I just like on the onset, I'll just say this has nothing to do with any specific thing that has happened or any specific conversation that I've had with a person. This is just mulling over in my mind for a while and just sort of observing in our culture as a whole, and it seeps into the church. And so I just thought we'd talk about it a little bit. And the issue is civility and the ability to disagree on issues and not let it deteriorate to the point where it's totally unproductive. So here's where this is coming from. Like in our culture, I'm seeing this all over the place where if you disagree with somebody, it's a personal attack on them. Or if you point out an opinion that's contrary to theirs, it deteriorates into just attacking one another. Right? So example, when it comes to politics, this is probably the most visible, maybe. So, Republicans are always going after Democrats for like not loving America or not being American. And Democrats are always going after Republicans for the same thing. And it's just, it's deteriorated so much that you can't even have a productive conversation about your disagreements anymore. You know what I mean? Like we disagree, therefore I hate you. That's kind of the mentality that sort of seeps out into the culture, or at least it's the perception that is given. And some of it is because of inflammatory language. Like we're a shock culture. We say things to try to get a response. You know, you get what I'm saying?
Well, everybody wants everyone to agree with their line of thought.
Yeah.
So what winds up happening is if somebody doesn't move off of their position, then we go to attack.
Right.
And now we're going to not just attack the position, but we attack the person.
Yeah.
And so that's where you get into sticky grounds. It's just, we have this extremely hard time as the train blows.
Yeah. The train whistle blows in the background.
We just have an extremely hard time getting past this okay, you see something different than I see.
Mm-hmm.
We can still be friends. We can still, if we're Christians, we can still be brothers.
Yeah.
But then for whatever reason, we can't get past these secondary things, and we start hitting the other person, and start attacking the other person, saying, you've got to see this the way I see it. You got to agree with me. And I mean, I can even see myself working through some of those things. I've had to learn to step back and say, it's okay that you don't see this the way I see it.
Yeah.
So
me too. And like, I think for people like us, like we're both really sort of like, I don't know, like we're both sort of, I don't know what the right word for it is. We're principled in our thoughts and in what we see as truth. And so, very principled people, very passionate people on whatever side it's on. I mean, I'm not saying it's just an issue for us, but I see this coming out with us in particular because we think through an issue, we come to a conclusion on an issue, and then it's like, well, if you disagree, then you obviously haven't thought through this. At least that's what it is for me.
Yeah, same thing. Or I'll tend to argue something just to try to get somebody to see what I see because I think it's so obvious.
Yeah,
and somebody else is coming at it from a different viewpoint, and I'm not giving that person's thoughts or where they've landed that maybe they have thought through it and they have a different thought process to help me grow, and be patient with them and actually speak to them in a way that's going to help them versus it's just making them shut down when I talk with them. So
here's some of the things that I've noticed that we tend to do. And like I said, this is not coming from an ivory tower where we don't struggle with this. I think one of the reasons that we're talking about this is something.
Why does everybody say ivory tower? Where have you ever seen an ivory tower?
I haven't seen an ivory. Have you seen an ivory tower? That would be a weird thing to build.
Big elephant tusk.
Yeah. How would you build a tower out of ivory? It would be very tiny. You wouldn't look down on anybody.
What's made of ivory?
I don't know. I've never thought about this. It's just a euphemism that we use.
You should use gold.
Whatever, Joe. Stop. Just agree with me.
Well, but gold makes sense because
no, it doesn't.
Yes, look,
I said ivory.
Like in The Hobbit.
I said ivory. That's all that matters. Stop. You don't even know. You've never read The Hobbit. What are you talking about? You hate The Hobbit. You hate The Hobbit. You watched the movie? Oh, I guess that made you a Tolkien expert.
See,
this is hyperbole again.
Okay, well, we were at Ivory Tower.
Yeah. So, anyway, we're not looking down on somebody from our highly positioned granite tower and looking down on other people. This is something I've wrestled with, that I'm working through, that I've seen in my own life. And so here's some of the things that I've noticed that sort of come out. Number one, like we have a social media culture where we all have social media accounts and
no accountability.
Yeah. No accountability with that. And we can post whatever we want about anything. And we feel like we have the right to speak into every single issue as a result of that. So I can sit there and I can comment on something I know absolutely nothing about, as if I know everything about it. Or I can do a quick Google search and find the first article that agrees with my position and post it, regardless of whether or not there's any truth to that article or not. Right. So I think social media plays into this. This is a weird dynamic that we have in our culture that has added fuel to this fire. I can just block somebody if I don't like them. If I disagree with them and they disagree with me and they're getting on my nerves, I don't have to work it out. I don't have to have a discussion with them. I can just block them or unfollow them.
Yeah.
So I think social media plays into it. I think the way it manifests itself is we tend to demonize people that disagree, or demonize our opponent. So when I'm saying opponent, I'm just saying somebody that disagrees. I'm not saying like we're against one another, although that kind of the way it plays out a lot, but we tend to demonize the other person that disagrees with us. We assume motives a lot. We tend to read into things that people say a lot. We respond with emotion rather than actually assessing the validity of what they're saying in their argument. We don't listen well. to what other people are saying and where they're coming from and try to understand their position before we engage with it. We can't, like, the rational argument tends to be missing because because we've experienced so many times where somebody's just attacked us, we automatically assume that they're attacking us by disagreeing with us in a lot of cases. And we tend to not be able to have rational arguments. And there's like this culture now where there's no freedom to just agree to disagree. Like, we can't say, okay, we don't see eye to eye on this. You see something different than what I see it. Let's just agree to be friends in spite of that. You know, and so what ends up happening is we surround ourselves with people that think the exact same way that we do, and we become like echo chambers, right? We just get people to like our stuff and join us in attacking somebody else. And especially like on social media, like if I surround myself, let's use an example. If I surround myself with a bunch of Republican friends and I say a lot of Republican things and they like my Republican things, how is that even engaging in a discussion? You're not actually engaging with anybody in that because you haven't allowed anybody into your life that disagrees with you. You know what I mean? There's no balance to it.
I'm just trying to think through how do you get past that though? Because it's pretty natural. We tend to go towards the people that think like us, that agree with us, or maybe not agree with us, but live in the same. I mean, we live in a bubble. Mm-hmm. In any region, people live in a bubble. Yeah. And they think the only people that are out there are the people that are like them. Mm-hmm. And everybody else is just a crazy, kooky person if they're on the other side of it. Right. So you run into that anywhere. I mean, unless you're going to pursue, like, I think maybe we need to move off politics, because I think politics is really hard for where we're at. Right. Because we are in an extremely conservative place here. Right. So politically, you're not going to run into very many people towards the left. The majority of people, probably 90% of the people here, are to be pretty conservative. Yeah. And politically conservative, and which automatically makes you a Republican, automatically makes you somebody who loves the flag most of the time. And
let's come back to that. Okay. Let's come back to that, because like we also live in a very mobile culture. So for example, let's talk in this, right? Let's use an example from our context here, where there are younger people that maybe have moved into York from a different location. They came from California to go to college and ended up staying here, right? They probably fall into that 20% or that 10% that wouldn't agree with a majority of maybe political positions. Or we've got people that have moved into our context that come from a Roman Catholic background, or people that come from a Lutheran background or something like that, right? So rather than finding opportunities to build relationships with those people and to hear what they have to say and engage with them, we tend to only be around people that agree with us. And so I'm not even talking, this isn't even an issue of geography. This, in a lot of cases, this is an issue of age. Like, cause there are different things that different generations value. Right. So what do we hear a lot? All those dumb millennials. Right. Those immature millennials. Well, no one's ever, like, in a lot of cases, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but in a lot of cases, the people that are saying that have never really taken the time to think through, okay, well, why is this person thinking the way that they are? Why is this person having this approach that's different from me? You know, or on the other side, well, those baby boomers, they're just old fashioned, right? So I'm not even talking about a geographical or political thing. This is present everywhere. This has to do with even age or generational differences, right? So think, for example, in the church, those young people, they don't respect God because they don't wear a suit to church. Those old people are crusty because they do wear a suit to church. Why don't they catch up? Yeah. Right. You know what? You see what I'm saying? I'm just using that as an illustration. These issues exist, and we can't talk through them and have a rational discussion about them because we've segregated ourselves into our little echo chambers, and all the young people sit down here together and complain about the people that wear suits, and all of the people that wear suits sit over here and complain about the people that don't. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Don't you think it's frustrating though? Because generally the reason I don't want to talk about those things with people is because they are so divisive and nobody actually wants to have a legitimate discussion or hear the other thought process out. And so end up not talking about that. I generally will shy away from those conversations because they're not going to be fruitful and they're going to drive larger wedges and larger barriers between myself and the other person. So,
but that's before you go on, because that totally makes my point. That's the issue. The issue is that we are unwilling or unable. I don't know which it is.
I think it's more unable.
Yeah.
Like, at least for me, I'm not unwilling.
Yeah.
But maybe it is. I don't see, I have had very, very conversations with people that I disagree with about things like that. Now here lately, I've been talking with a couple of guys and had some few conversations where we can disagree on something. And maybe this is on me too, as I'm a younger man and as a believer, I need to grow in patience with people and not making them feel like I'm attacking. I know I contended as I super passionate about it. Anything I would talk about that I feel strongly about.
Right.
And so I think that comes across as, I know I've been told, as angry or attacking. So maybe those are things that I need to work on too, that other younger people, because I think a lot of younger people in the same spot. Younger people are smart and they want their life to mean something.
Yeah.
Like they just don't want to fit into the mold. And so they learn about stuff. They grab onto something. They have a conviction on it and they'll fight for it and they'll stand on it.
But even what you just said though, like, here's my point. My point is, I agree with everything you just said. My point is simply that those conversations are unable to happen because, like what you just said, I found that they're very, very infrequently are they fruitful.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how to disagree. We don't know how to have a conversation with somebody that has a differing opinion than us and be able to walk away from that, whether it's agreeing or disagreeing, and still have some sort of relationship with that person. We're unable or unwilling, whichever one it is, to sit down and listen to somebody's disagreement. Instead, we entrench ourselves and refuse to cross barriers.
I think this ties back to kind of what you were talking about with the social media thing.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons that we can't have those real conversations and we can't move past the pettiness is because there's not an actual relationship there with the people that we're engaging with.
And there's not a face-to-face interaction.
Right.
It's all online.
Well, so there's no trust that the person actually loves you and is expressing a different opinion to try to help you grow. And they're doing the same thing for you.
Right.
So there's not a relationship. There's no trust there. So that doesn't happen. And without that, because I'm trying to think through the conversations that I've had here in the last few months with guys that I have had good conversations of disagreement with.
Yeah.
They're all people that I have relationships with that I trust, that I believe have my best interest in mind. And I'm pretty positive that they believe I have their best interest in mind. And that's when you have those good conversations happening.
Yeah. Well, and okay. So let me go back to this thing here. This might be a controversial thing to say. Okay. Just if you're listening, hear me out on this. But whether you are pro-Trump or anti-Trump, you've got to admit that Trump is a polarizing figure, right? Like here's the danger, right? When Obama was president, everything Obama did was wrong to Republicans, and everything that he did was glorious and good to Democrats. Okay. Now Trump is the president. Everything that he does is automatically good to Republicans, and everything that he does is automatically bad to Democrats. My point is that
generally,
my point is there's very few. And if you disagree with Trump and you're a Republican, all of a sudden you're not a Republican anymore. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we can't be willing to say, okay, look, your tweets are just really bad. You need to stop tweeting. I'm not saying that your policy is necessarily bad. I'm saying that your tweets are bad. Stop tweeting, because then you're attacking Trump and you're not agreeing with him. You're not following it. It's almost like we've become so divided as a country that we mirror more of a socialist type of state where you fall in line with the political party or else you're demonized by that political party.
The same thing with guns right now.
Yeah.
If you're for guns and for people owning them, then you're automatically for school shooting.
Yeah, you hate kids.
You hate kids and you hate people that, like, you've got the Vegas shooting that happened this year.
Yep.
You've got the one that just happened in Florida. And I know there's been some others this year that I can't think of right off the top of my head. But if you are pro-gun, then you are anti-life.
Yep. And if you're not, if you're pro-gun control, then you love kids more than others.
Right.
Right. So here's the other thing. Like, we just had this school shooting in Florida this last week. What happens immediately once that happens? All of the news media outlets start jockeying for top position to try to push their agenda. Everybody starts talking about guns, and nobody thinks about the fact that there were a bunch of kids that are no longer alive, that there are a bunch of families that are grieving, that there are kids that have been scarred by what they've seen that are going to have to carry that with them for the rest of their lives. And we as a church, as the church, not us here in Nebraska, but we as the church have become more identified with politics than we have with Christ. And the reason I say that is because what do you hear about? You don't hear about, in a lot of cases. Now there are some. I want to be fair here, but in a lot of cases, what you don't hear about is the church stepping into that point of need and meeting those people in their point of need. Even within the church, like, how welcome is somebody that affiliates with the Democratic Party welcome in the mainline conservative evangelical church?
Yeah, not.
Exactly, because what we've done is we've placed our political preference or our political identification or our political ideology, none of which are necessarily bad. We've placed them above Christ in that respect. So now if you come and you vote Democrat, you're automatically a baby killer. Well, no, not necessarily, right? Like, I agree that that's a huge pitfall of the Democratic platform, but maybe they're voting for a Democrat that agrees with them on social issues where there's a disagreement with Republicans on social issues and is actually not for abortion.
And that's where the differencing in opinion has to come. Because for me, that is really the only issue I will vote on. Mm-hmm. For somebody else, they may not have that same conviction. They may still see abortion as wrong, but they see some of these other things that they agree with on the Democratic Party, mm-hmm. or I don't even like to call it that. It's you have conservative and liberal. So towards the liberal party, and if they want to go there, that I think they have the freedom to do that.
Yeah,
and I should be able to have a conversation with them respectfully about why I think that their vote is hurting.
Yeah.
And maybe even, in my opinion, it conflicts
with the gospel in a way.
It conflicts with scripture. It conflicts with the gospel. It conflicts with what we say we believe.
But here's the thing. This is the thing, though. We're not trying to make this all about politics, but how much in the last 20 years has there been a Republican Congress, a Republican
and we still have
House.
Roe v. Wade.
We have a Republican president. We had a Republican Supreme Court, and we still have Roe versus Wade. Mm-hmm. So, like, we say that we set these paradigms up, and we're unwilling to reassess them. We're unwilling to look at where we're at. And it's not just politics. We're just using this because it's low hanging fruit. It's easy to point this out in a way that everybody can understand using politics. And somebody's probably turned us off already, but here's the thing. Like, when we come to issues, we're unwilling to hear somebody out. So here's a great example. The football players, Kaepernick, when he knelt for the national anthem and started all that hullabaloo about that, everybody was like, after him. Nobody stopped to ask why he did it. So there was a Navy SEAL. So if you're listening and your blood pressure is raising, nobody has more right to be angry at Kaepernick than a Navy SEAL. Okay. Nobody. This is a guy that has deployed more times has stood in the gap, has fought for freedom, is one of the most elite soldiers in the world, and has lost buddies to the war on terrorism. This Navy SEAL actually went and contacted him, and they sat down and had a dialogue. And he said, I hear what you're saying. And here's the issue. When you kneel for the national anthem, or what was it? I can't remember what he did. Anyway, when you do this one thing for the national anthem, it's very disrespectful to soldiers. Why don't you just do this instead? And he gave him an alternative. And Kaepernick said, yeah, okay, that works. I can do that. And he did. And so
it was sitting on the bench.
That's what it was.
He told him to kneel.
That's what it was. It was sitting on the bench instead of standing and putting your hand over your heart. And this Navy SEAL said, why don't you kneel instead? Yeah. That's more respectful. Right. So here's an example of where two people, and he said, like, I don't agree with him on everything, but I was willing to hear where he was coming from. And I heard that there were some issues there that I do agree need to be addressed. Right. So here's the point. The point is everybody automatically refused to have a conversation about it and dug in their party lines and dug in where they stand and made it all about you hate America, you hate soldiers, everything else. I was in the Army for 7 years, so I can say this stuff. Here's a guy that has done more for his country than 99% of the people in the United States, and he's willing to go and have a conversation with him. We should learn from that. That's my point. My point is we should learn from that. And so this doesn't just apply in the secular world or in the world of politics or in the world of social issues. This applies in the church because here's my fear. This has seeped into the church.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like the Southern Baptist Convention right now is on fire over this issue of Calvinism and traditionalism. And like, if you go to different Facebook groups, what do you see? You see just attack. Like, we can't just sit there and say, all right, let's talk about this. Let's try to have a productive conversation about this. Let's talk through where we're coming from. And all right, you tell me your hermeneutic on this text. I'll tell you where I'm coming from on this text and what I'm seeing in this text. And if at the end of the day, we don't agree on it, do we agree on the gospel? Right. Now, I'm not trying to reduce these things to their minimum thing because these other issues are important, but
they're so inflamed.
Yes.
That the gospel has been put in the rearview mirror and we're driving away without it.
Yeah.
And all we talk about are these issues that we disagree with.
Exactly.
That are ultimately secondary. They're not, like, eschatology is a big one.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of younger people that are coming up right now that are actually studying and reading.
Yeah.
And they don't agree with where we've been the last 70 years.
Yeah.
In the evangelical conservative church.
Yeah.
And so, like, we won't even talk about that topic because, one, it's really hard to study and I don't really want to talk about it.
Let's be honest, it's tough.
Yeah. But we are going to run into this friction with people. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be like, well, you can't be Christian then. Yeah. You can't be conservative then. You're just a liberal.
Yeah.
And so why even have the conversation?
Exactly.
And I just run into that a lot. And same thing with music is a big one.
Yeah.
Well, I've had very, very few legitimate, level-headed conversations with people about music choice and style.
Yep.
It's always embedded in opinion and what we used to do or what we're not doing. And this goes both not just with people who like traditional, but people who like new, really new style. Why are you guys doing these old hymns?
Mm-hmm.
They're old. Get with the times.
Yeah.
Like, and so you just get it from both, and nobody's willing to actually have a real conversation about why you're doing what you're doing, about same thing with preaching style, preaching length. I mean, there's tons of things you can go to and nobody wants to actually have a legitimate conversation. They just want to tell you what they think. And if you don't bend to what they think and what they want to see happen, then they demonize you, they attack you, and you can't even have a real conversation and actually grow from it.
Yeah.
And it actually even shuts you down as the person who's receiving those things.
Yeah.
You're not going to listen to me? Okay, well, I don't care what you say then.
Yeah. And that's honestly, you just entrench.
Yep.
You just get entrenched in your position. And here's the sad thing. Maybe there was an actual legitimate thing.
Right.
You know, that on any side, I'm not saying that I'm not saying either side is right on that issue. I'm saying
I agree.
maybe there's an actual legitimate thing that you can learn from it. It's an issue of humility. Really, when it comes down to it, it's an issue of pride and humility. I don't need to listen to this person. I disagree with them, therefore they're wrong.
Yeah.
Not, hey, you know what? There's probably something I can learn from this person. Or this person, I've had to learn this as a pastor. Like there's this person that's being critical of me on a certain thing or a certain issue. I can still learn something from that person.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I've ever, well, I never say never, but I don't think that I can remember had a significant disagreement with somebody where they came and they had an issue with something that I had done or I had said, or the way I was pastoring or the way I was shepherding or something like that, where I haven't learned something from that person and been able to say, you know what, they had a really legitimate point here. I need to work on that.
Yeah.
Or made me rethink an issue. So we've entrenched. We can't even have those discussions. And that's what's bothering me. That's the problem. The problem is not that we disagree. The problem is that we can't disagree with civility. We can't disagree with listening to what the other person has to say. We can't disagree with kindness and love and humility. And we can't disagree and just agree to disagree on that issue, but have unity for the sake of the gospel. So you and we don't agree on everything.
Despite popular belief.
You and I don't agree with everything, with each other on everything. There are times where you'll come in on Saturday night because you run through the worship set on Saturday night, and I'll be sitting here studying, and we'll have an hour-long conversation where we disagree. And it's like you say something and I'm like, I don't know. I don't see it that way. Or I'll say something and you'll say, I think you're wrong on that. And we just talk through it. Right. We're still good friends. We still have issues that we disagree on. We had a long discussion a couple nights ago or a week ago or whatever on the issue of homeschooling and public schooling.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't think that we necessarily agree on that 100%.
No.
I think we're closer than those people that would sit there and say, if you public school, you don't love your kids, or if you homeschool, you're cheating them out of something, right? Yeah. So we can see one another's perspective. We don't necessarily agree with that perspective, but we can see and respect one another in spite of that.
Right.
Right. So that's what I'm talking about. And that just seems to be something that is lacking in the church and in the culture. And it's one of those areas where I think that the culture has infiltrated the church subtly. Like, what does Satan want to do? He wants to sow discord among believers.
So, but this ultimately comes like, I think through those things, I want to make sure people hear what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And when those conversations become useless is when I start to get the feeling that they're not actually hearing me.
Yeah.
And so then I'll find myself repeating myself or saying something, trying to say one thing a whole bunch of different ways to try to make that point, because I don't feel like they're hearing me. And so I still think the solution to this though is relationships. Mm-hmm. So if we have real relationships and we have real trust amongst each other, and if we approach these conversations with a humble heart and a humble attitude, like you can have some real conversations. There's guys that we meet with regularly that I do not agree with on some theological issues, some doctrine issues.
Yeah.
Like and there are issues I've studied out too. Mm-hmm. So I've got a strong opinion on them, but I am hearing those guys out and I'm going back and I'm looking and then I'm coming back and challenging them, and they're allowing me to challenge them too.
Yeah. It goes both ways.
Right. So if we come in with that attitude instead of I'm right and I want to make everybody see that I'm right and come to my way of thinking, if we would leave that attitude alone and just come into it with the attitude of we're going to grow from this conversation.
Yeah.
And we're going to for Christians, we're going to let the Spirit do his work and convict each person where he needs to be convicted and trust that. Instead of some of this, maybe as I think through this, is just a lack of trust that God's got things.
Yeah.
And we're trying to convince everybody to see it one way because we're going to be their saviors so they can see this that way, instead of just saying, okay, they don't see it.
Yeah.
And I got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Are they still holding to the gospel?
Mm-hmm.
Are they still holding to Christ alone, through faith alone, by his grace alone? If they are, they're still my brother.
Yeah.
And we can disagree on some of these other things.
Yeah. And so I put something out on Facebook a little while ago, asking a question about this. Here's some of the responses. So Joseph said, don't ever talk about religion or politics at the dinner table. When that's the expectation at home with your own families, how can you expect to have any civil discussion with people to whom we are not related?
I'll agree with him on politics. But part of discipleship is talking about what.
No. What he's saying is we have this culture of you shouldn't talk about politics or religion at the table.
I see.
And if you can't do that at home, how are you supposed to do that with anybody else? And if you can't do that at home and be able to disagree with one another.
Okay.
That's what he's saying. Yeah. Clayton says, for the most part, disagreement only divides if you let it. Division over truth is necessary. Division over opinion is optional. Tied to that, Chad said, we need to be more like Jesus, full of grace and truth. Many tend to major on one of these at the expense of the other. We need to at least value both grace and truth in order to have meaningful and civil discussion. Of course, when properly understood, grace and truth go hand in hand, but we've distorted and divorced them. And as he wrote that, I was thinking about Paul talking about speaking the truth in love. And some of the discussions we've had about that. Like, you don't compromise truth because that's not loving, but you don't say the truth like a jerk because that's not loving. And you don't just love people and ignore the truth because then you're compromising the truth.
So something that you have to be really careful of. And so worship pastor Joe come out here, but you talked about we'll let emotions overtake instead of I think you said logic
or
right?
reason. Yeah.
So this is where that grace and truth. So the truth part is the reason part of this,
Mm-hmm.
but God's created us as emotional beings, as affectionate beings. And so what tends to happen with conservative people is they're all logical.
We're not talking about like politically.
Not
We're
politically.
talking about
I'll stay within the realm of
church conservative.
Yeah, church.
Yeah.
Right. So we tend to push emotion down.
I would say that's not necessarily a religiously conservative thing. It's a reform thing.
Maybe from a leadership perspective, is where I see it the most. Is there's this wanting one to lead over the other, and I know I've talked about this a lot here lately, but those two things have to work together, and that's where what he's talking about with grace and truth, grace or truth and love, they work together.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other. Otherwise, you get too much of one and not enough of the other.
Well, and going back to what you're saying, like, gracious thing to do sometimes is to say the truth and then walk away and be okay with them not agreeing with it, because God's the one that has that. He handles that.
Right.
He works that. Graydon said the way both sides are pretty much any issue jump immediately to ad hominem or at the man attacks, and stereotyping the other side just leads to name calling and third grade behavior. I agree.
Yeah.
Chris Sinclair said there in his book, How to Think, Alan Jacob describes a debate style where before someone can voice a rebuttal, they must first explain their opponent's position in a way which the opponent agrees. This ensures that both sides are operating on the correct and sympathetic understanding of their opponent's position. That being said, civil disagreement is impossible many times because we fail to properly understand and sympathize with the other person's position we disagree with. We go into debates to win adherence to our position and make our position seem the most rational and the other the most absurd, but we never try and actually learn anything through the debate, only spew out what we know without regard for actually handling and processing the arguments the other one is making. That is good. Like, so we live in a culture that's got like a 55% divorce rate, right? And it's climbing. And I wonder of how much of that is because of this type of culture that's come into our culture, where we can't disagree, or we immediately attack the other person rather than trying to understand where they're coming from first.
I agree with that. Part of that issue though is I think people need to step back when they're in a disagreement. Like, I know this is really true for me. I could sit and talk with somebody for 3 and 4 hours and we could be disagreeing. And I need to actually step back and think about what was said. Yeah. Because all that generally happens for me is I start to elevate. Mm-hmm. And then you do get that emotion maybe starts to move above logic instead of evenly moving together.
Yeah.
And then it becomes irrational and I can't really think. If I step back and I remove myself and I think about what was said, all of a sudden, okay, there's something legitimate here. There's something legitimate here. There's something that I can address here. But maybe the rest of it's not true.
Right.
And I can come back and address that. But if that works for me, why would I not think that the other person needs to step back and do that as well?
Yeah. Well, and like he was saying, like, at least try to understand, like when we disagree with somebody, we're so focused on trying to win the disagreement and we're not at all focused on trying to understand where that other person is coming from.
Yeah.
Like it would be really helpful maybe
to really listen.
Yeah. To sit back and say, okay, what do you mean by that? I heard you say, X, Y, or Z. What do you mean by that? Can you explain that a little bit more to me so I can understand where you're coming from? And instead of just assuming right off the bat, they mean this and going after them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and you know, when I just think when it comes to, especially for Christians, the world is looking at us. You know, now here's
and they see this.
Yeah, they
trash.
do. They do. What's different about the church than what I see in the rest of the culture? You know, so like we're getting ready to go to T4G in April.
Yeah.
Together for the gospel conference. And the four main guys that do that are CJ Mahaney, who's charismatic. You've got Sinclair Ferguson, Lincoln Duncan. Thank you.
Yeah.
All those Presbyterians are sort of the same. It was a joke. If you're a Presbyterian and listening, we love you.
Dever.
Yeah. Lincoln Duncan is a Presbyterian. He's the president of Reformed Theological Seminary. Al Mohler, who's the president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, and Mark Dever, who's a Southern Baptist pastor. Now, that's a lot of diversity there. But T4G, Together for the Gospel, they're in agreement on the gospel.
Yeah.
You know, they have John MacArthur come and preach, where John MacArthur is a leaky dispensationalist and has some views that they would disagree with. You're never going to find somebody that you agree 100% with everything on. And yet they come together under the banner of the gospel. So going back to that divorce rate thing, like how many of these divorces come from the fact that there's an unwillingness to listen, an unwillingness to talk, an unwillingness to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, an unwillingness to try to understand their perspective and have some introspection and think through, what am I doing that I need to change? You know, G.K. Chesterton said the problem with the world is me. And when we go into these disagreements, we automatically think the problem is them. Maybe by just a change of perspective, we can listen better to what other people are saying and hear them and interact with them in a way that helps us grow.
Yeah, one of my mentors, one of the sayings he always has, I'll never point the finger before pointing the thumb.
Yeah.
Like, we need to be looking at ourselves. Thumb.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, when you point, the thumb is pointing toward them too.
No, it's not.
No,
if you put your thumb.
I said never point the finger before. Okay, I got you now.
Yeah.
We're tracking.
So we need to be, and part of that is just we're unforgiving people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we automatically take offense to everything that's said at us. And I won't let that go.
Yeah.
Often it's really hard for me to let hard things that people say to me go
mm-hmm.
when I know that they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of people struggle, and I think that's why this is such a hard thing for people to work through.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the issue. What do you think are some solutions then to helping us not get past this? Because I don't think we will, but to grow in having those conversations and learning how to disagree with each other, and learning when we're having those conversations, we're not attacking each other personally.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we need to learn how to do that too.
Yeah.
But we're there for each other because we love each other. We see them as our brothers, and we want to see them grow. Yeah.
I think like the first theology application, right? So first one is that when God uses people within his church, unfortunately, Satan at times uses people within his church too. You've got, for example, in 2 Timothy, Hymenaeus and Alexander, who are within the church that Satan is using. Okay. Now that's an extreme example,
right?
But you also have, look at all of the letters to the churches. How many of them have issues that apostles are addressing. Satan loves to work discord within the church community. If he can get us turned against one another, if he can get us after one another, if he can get us bickering and entrenched and unwilling to listen to one another, then he's winning a massive victory there. And so the first thing is understanding that the biggest element of this is a spiritual warfare, I think. When we're not acting any differently from the world and Satan is God of this world, that should be a big red flag.
Yeah.
Like when we can't disagree in a way that's different from the world, or when we can't have discussions and disagreements and talk through those in a way that demonstrates grace and truth working together, love and truth working together, then we're no different than anybody else. And like I said, like we were talking about before, the world sees that. So number one, understand, I think a lot of this is spiritual warfare. So therefore the solution to spiritual warfare is to put on Christ. That's Ephesians chapter 6. We put on the truth that we do know. We put on the armor of God, and we do war in the strength that God provides and trusting in him, because we're not fighting against each other. We're fighting against a spiritual enemy, right? So that's number one, is understanding that. Number two, I think, is being willing to ask questions. Like, force yourself to ask questions. Make yourself ask questions. If you're constantly thinking about what you're going to say next, and this is me talking to me here, if you're constantly thinking about what you're going to say next, you're not really trying to understand that other person, not being gracious.
You're not trusting the process of what you worked through in study and in being a believer and spirit empowerment. You're trusting solely upon what you know and what you think.
Yep. And your own ability to swerve their thinking.
Right. And so you don't actually listen to what they say, because you're trying to think steps ahead of them, instead of just being real and being there and maybe saying something stupid. And that's all right at times. So I say a lot of stupid things. So I think with that, so many conversations about this is drenched in I think. Is what you think what Scripture says. So if you are a believer, is what you think, is that what Scripture really says?
Yeah.
And then, okay, maybe it is. What else does Scripture say that you know about communicating with your brother? I think about Colossians 3.
Yeah, Colossians 3.
Therefore,
bearing with one another,
compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Do those things come out when you're having conversations with other believers?
Yeah.
Or are you being harsh and growly and elevating and domineering in your conversations with people? So one, stop saying I think if what you think doesn't line up with Scripture.
And if it does line up for Scripture, just go to Scripture, because that's more authoritative anyway.
And do it with a compassionate heart, with kindness, with humility, and bearing with that person as they work through that, instead of being judgmental and saying, well, I'm not going to listen to anything you say, because they're your brother. And one of the reasons you're having a conversation is to grow. Maybe God's using that person to push you into something too.
Yeah.
So go look at yourself as well.
So Peter and Paul, both apostles, Peter was dead wrong, and Paul called him out.
Yeah.
Right?
Galatians.
That's love. Right? So if Paul and Peter disagreed on an issue, then we need to be okay with disagreeing on issues. Now, that was a gospel issue in I get it, but later on, like in 1 Peter, I think it is, Peter says, like, Paul says some things that are just really hard to understand.
Yeah.
Like, he's just kind of difficult. Like, and they understood that, like you look at Timothy. Timothy was a weenie. Yeah. He was like ready to run away from Ephesus because things were hard. Yeah. And Paul had to tell him, hey, stay. Do you think they disagreed on that? Probably, because Paul had to tell him to stay. Yeah. So there's times to be okay with disagreeing but Timothy had to, I don't think it was just the fact that Paul was an apostle. I think Timothy had that relationship with him. You can see that. And he knew that Paul was for him and was looking out for him and wanted what was best for him and loved Christ.
So do people know that we're for them?
Yeah.
When we're having conversations?
Yeah.
And do we know that people are for us? Like, do we feel that they're for us?
Yeah. Are you willing to think the best of somebody and give them the benefit of the doubt until proven wrong?
Yeah.
You know, that's a big one.
I think that's really hard for us. That's hard for me. I know that, but I think it's hard for us in general as believers.
Yeah, I agree. So, one other thing that I would say is, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. Right? That's huge. Like, a lot of this stuff, I think, is just pride. We get so entrenched in stuff that we're unwilling to give grace to somebody else. We're unwilling to let our pride go, and we're so focused on fixing them. We're not really concerned about them. We're concerned about with what they think, not with them. And that's an issue of pride. And I think most of that knowledge puffs up. Like, for those people that have studied something out really well, that's probably a bigger threat to them than somebody else. But there's another pride on the other side that says, oh, well, he just quotes the Bible and stuff like this. I'm not going to listen to him. He doesn't care about my feelings or understand what I'm thinking. And now take that with we need to understand where one another is, and we need to care about their feelings. But sometimes when you say hard things that are true, there's this pride that rears up over here on the other side that says, I'm not going to listen to that.
Well, and how well do you communicate? Because I think that's a reality. How well do you communicate that to the other person?
Yeah.
Because lots of times we just run away, and we'll use that another format where we're not face to face.
Yeah.
And it comes off completely wrong instead of like talking something out. That's how healthy relationships and how these disagreements can actually happen.
Yeah.
And we feel like the other person cares about us instead of they're just attacking us.
There's some real beasts on Facebook, man.
Yeah.
Some real beasts behind a keyboard. There's that. Oh, we'll link it in the show notes. There's that I'm a social justice warrior. Or is it the spiritual life, the ultra spiritual life or whatever? He's like, I'm a social justice warrior. And he's like, my keyboard is my sword. I can destroy anybody when I'm on my keyboard. Like, it's a lot of times that's the way it plays out.
Yeah.
So I think just those fruits of the Spirit, man, are they evident in us? Are we willing to, if it's not a gospel issue, like, are we willing to give grace to the other person? Like, I get if somebody's denying the gospel, but if we're talking about eschatology, or we're talking about Calvinism and traditionalism or something like that, like, let's be gracious with one another. Let's be, and man, I'm going to hammer Calvinists here. We should be the most gracious of all people, because our theology says that we did absolutely nothing.
Right.
In our salvation. I'm not implying that other people say that they work their way towards salvation on the traditionalist side. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, if we take our theology at face value and we believe that everything that we have is due totally 100% to God's grace and his regenerating work in us, and apart from that, we would never go to him. We would never want him.
Then start acting like that.
Grow up a little bit. Stop being a jerk.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. And
stop thinking that you have to change everything, because there are a lot of Calvinists out there that think that they have to Calvinize everyone.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm going to take that. Stop Calvinizing people.
That's the approach that they take. And we need to, if we really believe that God's in control and that he's sovereign and that he calls his people to himself, then we shouldn't have to worry about that.
Yep. Absolutely. So cool. Well, I look forward to hearing the comments on social media.
there's a whatever you call that, a plug. There's a plug for when we talk about bad Calvinists.
Yeah, so we will talk about bad Calvinists in a while, but for right now, look, just here's our sort of admonition to you. Just take some time and pray about this. Like, take this to God and ask him to show you areas in your life where this is an issue. Because I guarantee you, we all have these areas, because like I said, this is a spiritual warfare issue, I think, for the most part. We all have these issues. So ask God to challenge you and show you by the Holy Spirit, convict you dang it, convict you of where this is an issue in your life, and ask for the grace to overcome that. Ask for more of the fruits of the Spirit. Ask for more of God's grace in your life to be able to like take a step back and in humility, counting as others as more significant than yourselves, ask questions, give the benefit of the doubt, seek unity. Like we go to a church that believes the same thing about baptism, right? That doesn't mean that everybody that believes differently about baptism believes the false gospel. It doesn't mean that we can't have fellowship and friendships outside of our church family. It just means that we value that and we have that conviction. So we hold to that together.
You need to look, and I'll say this to myself too. You need to look in the mirror and say, have you been the cause of this?
Yeah.
Do you need to go to a brother or a sister and say, I have not helped with this.
Yeah.
And I say these things because I want to see you grow, but I'm not listening to you. And maybe an apology there is needed.
I've been prideful
to grow that. So like tying to what you said about just right then about humility.
Yeah.
Like part of that humility is looking at yourself and saying, have I done this? Was I in a situation where somebody was saying something to me that was helpful to me?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of saying thank you for that, or instead of communicating that in a loving way, I was harsh with them. And even though I took that and I've applied it, they don't know it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And for the love of all that is good, stop arguing on Facebook. If you can honestly tell me, of the 5 people that are listening, if you can honestly tell me that your mind has been changed on literally anything on Facebook through fighting on Facebook, please come talk to me, because I would love to hear that. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
It just entrenches further. So face to face, man, like actually have a relationship and a conversation with somebody. So good stuff.
Yep.
So,
no free stuff this week.
No free stuff this time, but we got something coming up.
Yep.
It's going to be good.
We got lots of things to choose from.
We do have lots of things to choose from. But
we're sitting in a room full of books. I could just start picking.
You can't
books.
give most of these away. These are mine.
You wouldn't know.
They're my idol.
You wouldn't know for like a year.
Until I needed it.
Where's that book?
Where is that book? I knew it was right here. All right. So, hey, if you liked what you heard and you're enjoying the show, please subscribe on iTunes and then rate us and leave some feedback for us. We'd love to hear it. You can find us on Facebook on Pastor Discussions Facebook page, or email us at pastordiscussions@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your feedback on this. And we're just going to be praying that God uses this to start to improve this issue within the church, so that we can actually have a witness in our community where people see something different in us, and that's attractive, because Christ is attractive and he does that work. He changes us. So,
and the awesome thing is this has been beneficial for you and I too.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're doing this for the church, our church here, and for church and Christians, whoever would want to listen. It does go across the nation. It is available to
everyone in the world. We have a worldwide. We are on the World Wide Web.
Right. But so hopefully it's been beneficial, and so hopefully you'll be tuning in, and you'll tune in again next week for next week's episode of the Pastor Discussions podcast, your weekly conversation on doctrine, faith, and the Christian life.
Moving your head away from the microphone doesn't do anything to kill the sound.
I wasn't making any sound, though. I was just smiling. I was leaning my head back.
What?
Did you hear that? My headphones cut out for a second.
Yeah, mine did too.
Okay.
All right.